All right, guys, very excited to be joined by the former press secretary for Dr. Jill Biden, and someone I've known for quite a while, Michael LaRosa. Welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So
Good to see you, Michael.
We
Thank
wanted to
you.
have you on because you're not, a totally uncritical, Biden fan, but you do support him for re-election. And so we wanted to hear you strongly make the case. So first question I have for you is just what grade do you give him as president so far?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm a huge Biden fan.
Okay.
I have,
Yes.
sometimes I take issue with sort of the, strategies around him that are pursued, but I love all those guys, and winning an election like that in 2020 against an incumbent and being an underdog basically in a primary, you go through a lot with people, and certainly me and the First Lady traveled together for 3 years, and so I have a lot of affection and for the family personally and the president personally.
Good to know.
But I would also say that as president, judging by any historic measure, you might disagree with what he has done, but he has been the most effective president I think we've had since LBJ in terms of the amount of legislation he was able to get done with a Democratic Congress with a small majority, the same majority that exists now. He was able to do more than most presidents do in 8 years, and he did it basically in 2.5. So from that perspective, from the scoreboard perspective, he gets an A++. You couldn't ask for more to be done. You may not disagree with all of it, but he's gotten a lot done, and a lot of it came from wish lists for Democrats that they've been wanting to get done for decades.
So, Michael, what is your theory of the case for what went wrong then? So let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. We've got the right track, wrong track number. Right direction, 25%. Wrong direction, 65%. LBJ famously actually did very well on that number up until a little thing called Vietnam. So Biden doesn't have, or at least yet, anything like that on the horizon. How do you explain that number right there? This isn't just Republicans and Democrats. This is the entire country.
Yeah. So Mario Cuomo once said you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. Governing is a lot unpopular, especially with Democrats, because Democrats can be, as a party, sometimes very fraught in terms of issues and how they feel about compromise. And so the president has had to navigate a lot of that, a lot of different internal dynamics in the party. But he's kind of where a lot of incumbents are at this stage. There's a lot of fatigue with incumbents by this point. And I think that's why you're seeing there's some minimal primary challenge. There's some Democratic lack of enthusiasm. But that's all fairly standard operating procedure at this point in any administration.
Well, that's not necessarily true. So let's put the second one, Gallup, we have there. That's the overall approval rating that shows 40.7%. That's actually the second lowest at this time in history, except for Jimmy Carter. So many incumbents were actually doing quite better than that, including Barack Obama when he was running for president. Even Donald Trump actually was beating that number. So how do you explain that? Whenever he's only second, really, to Jimmy Carter.
Well, I would explain it by in terms of electoral politics. I mean, both Barack Obama and Bill Clinton got slaughtered in their midterms.
True.
This president and all the candidates that were running the last cycle ran on this president's record. And we had the most historic midterm as a party, and he had the most historic midterm as an incumbent president I think, since 1932. So the White House feels pretty validated about the direction they're going in. I wouldn't expect to see many changes because that, this red wave that everybody had been talking about just never materialized. And the president took a lot of credit for that, and they should.
Okay. But how much of that is about the Biden record and Biden accomplishments, and how much of that is about Dobbs, the overturning of Roe versus Wade? How much of that is about, psychotic Republican candidates, frankly, who were, very extreme and really out of touch and fixated on election conspiracies, et cetera? How much of it was really a referendum on those pieces versus anything that Joe Biden had done?
Well, I can't get the nuance past you, so I won't even try to spin. Look, I think even in the states where the Democrats won, where they had tough races, they were still, the Democratic candidates were more popular than President Biden. That's just a fact. But they were also more likable and more popular than their Republican opponents. So candidate quality was a big issue for sure. And then there's always unforeseen events that That's why I don't think every election can be really determined by any one-size-fits approach. And I think unforeseen events affect things all the time. I think we saw that with Obamacare, and we saw that with a couple of other things, like 9/11 affected that midterm election. And I think the Dobbs case absolutely energized Democrats to turn out in places that we didn't even expect.
So let me talk to you a little bit about Bidenomics, because there's been an effort from the administration to sell their economic record. They're saying, look, unemployment is low. We've created a lot of jobs, but in a lot of ways, the American people aren't feeling it. And certainly, we just showed you the approval rating. We showed you right track, wrong track. But even on measures of basic economic security, let's go ahead and put this next graphic up on the screen. You've got the percent of Americans struggling to pay their bills continues to go up. You also have increases in the percent of Americans without enough to eat. And, Michael, I want to say, some of the things that this president did at the beginning of the administration in particular, I was frankly kind of surprised by. And I think we're more progressive and more aggressive than was reflected in his Senate career. The stimulus checks, the child tax credit, even his attempts to reduce student loan debt, even though they've gotten stymied by the Supreme Court. And we could have a debate about whether he could fight more and how he could do that differently, et cetera. But a lot of those pieces I thought were really encouraging. But the story of his administration since then has been basically those programs getting slowly stripped back. And things that could have had more of a permanent impact, like the $15 minimum wage, for example, he's failed to get through. During the campaign trail, he used to talk about, we're going to do a public option in terms of expanding healthcare. I never hear anything about healthcare anymore. He's supposed to be the most pro-union president in history, yet any thought of passing the PRO Act or using his executive power to cancel contracts of union busters, that's fallen by the wayside. And so you have this reality of Americans who started off doing okay under the Biden administration and have slowly had these sort of, pandemic era supports pulled from them, where their bank accounts are being drained and they're struggling to pay their bills. And so now they're saying, listen, I'm in a tough spot here and inflation hasn't really helped me. So how do you square a message from the president that's trying to say, hey, the economy's great, and a reality that's being experienced by the American people that are saying, not in my household?
Yeah, well, there's no question Americans have to feel that in order to lend their support to the president. They have to start feeling the economic gains. Now, there was a New York Times article out, I think, or a new New York Times Siena poll out a couple days ago, and it said that actually the standard of living most people feel, well, I'm sorry, not most people, but the standard of living and the cost of consumer goods have actually, the cost of goods has come down.
Yeah.
Wages have gone up, are going up. Inflation is cooling. And the standard of living, people said they were worse off a year ago. It dropped about 10 points from the last year. So there's improvement. I think there is improvement in people's lives. But you're right, there's a lot. I mean, and that's why he's running for re-election, right? We have to get the child tax cut, or the child tax credit permanent. We have more to do on climate investment. We have more to do on an assault weapons ban, on codifying Roe. There's a lot to be done.
To be honest with you, though, I don't really hear that pitch much. What I hear from his team is, number one, I found it very revealing. I've brought this up like a million times on the show, but after Emmanuel Macron won in France, Ron Klain is like, oh, interesting, he won with 30% approval rating. Maybe that could be a model for us. That's number one. Number two, I hear, here's the list of things we did accomplish. And number three, I hear Trump is bad, which no disagreement there. I literally haven't heard a single agenda item for what would be accomplished in a second term. Isn't that, shouldn't he be making an affirmative case that's not just about, hey, the Republicans suck and Donald Trump is crazy? Shouldn't there be some sort of here's the plan, here's what we're going to do in the second term? I haven't heard that.
Well, okay. Let me unpack a little bit. First of all, I think during a re-election, I think part of the first thing incumbents need to do, and Barack Obama did this in May of 2011, George Bush did it in March of 2004. Once they had their opponent, they were immediately ready to make their opponent unacceptable to the American people. And that is going to be a very big part of the re-election, as it is for every re-election. But that's not to say that there is an affirmative case to be made. I agree with you that with all the legislative success he has had and the accomplishments and 300 bipartisan pieces of legislation, whatever, the legislative scoreboard doesn't always translate into voting behavior. There is more, right? There is performance, there's candidate quality, there is how you appear in front of the voters, the performance aspect of politics. There's a lot more that I think they're going to have to do because the numbers are where they are and they have to get them up. But you're right. There's a lot of things on the progressive agenda that need to be talked about, and he's going to have to address that as well.
Michael, the majority of Democrats and even the majority of the American people think that Biden is too old to be president. You served either with him or around him for several years. I mean, what case can you make at least on that front? I mean, it's very troubling and in some cases, disheartening and sad, kind of to see his overall public performance. This is a man that we've all seen on our television screens. Me before I was even basically since I was alive. So it's not like we could deny that things are a little bit different really on that front. He would be the oldest president in modern American history, no, in ever actually in American history, should he be reelected up until the day that he served. I mean, should Americans feel okay that he's up to the job? I'm putting this in the nicest way possible.
Yeah, I know you are. And the short answer is yes.
Okay.
But I remember back in the 90s when the Democrat retort to Bill Clinton was, you know what? He's creating 22 million jobs. The tech sector's booming. The economy we have record surpluses. He's done a fantastic job as president. Who cares what he does in his personal life, right? It's almost the same argument. Yes, he's 80. You can't escape it. He's going to be the oldest. He is the oldest president, and he is going to be the oldest president. But you know what? I would take 13 million jobs created in 2 years plus. Remember, think about what this 78, 80-year-old did. He walked into a crisis of huge proportion, unlike we've ever seen in our lifetime, since in a century. Not only did he, force a huge spending package to stimulate the economy through Congress, but he administered the most successful vaccination program in history. And we can't forget where we were when he came in and where we are now. Schools were closed, businesses were closed, the economy was feeling a lot of pain, and he's reversed a lot of that and actually created more jobs than at pre-pandemic levels. And he did that as he's 80-year-old, not to mention the huge wish list or laundry list I could run through that would take way too much of the time.
I think what people are getting at is we're talking about on a personal level.
On a personal level.
So you listen, I mean, there's a big narrative out there. A lot of people wonder, is this person actually up for the job? Does he get to the Oval until what, 9 a.m.? I mean, Jen Psaki and all these people are he's the most
Does anything I have said so far give you pause to whether he's up for the job?
Well, no, it's more so I'm not I'm not a novice to Washington. I know that advisors can run a lot of things. A lot of people think that he's effectively like a prop.
No, that's not true.
Well, okay, tell it. Make the case.
My God.
You actually work with him.
We're watching what's going on.
I don't know
Dianne
what's going on.
And with Mitch McConnell, and we're not feeling a lot of comfort.
Yeah,
I
they're
get
the same age as him.
But and age, as I've said before in public, age is a fair question. It was for Ronald Reagan. He doesn't get
he was 60.
You're right, but it was still an issue.
Yeah.
Think about, people have selective memories in Washington, but it was a huge issue when Bob Dole was running.
Sure.
But my advice to them has always been to shine a light on your weaknesses. That's where he is weak. That's where he is weak. People perceive him as old. Be self-deprecating about it. There's nothing else you can do. He says, watch him. Watch what he does. And he's been, like I said, probably the most successful president we've had since LBJ in terms of the amount of things he's been able to get done at his age. So I would take the 80-year-old over, Trump-nomics or DeSantis culture wars any day.
Okay.
So last question for you.
Sure. Just one more?
Just one more. We'll have you back.
We have you back.
Yeah. This is just the first of many conversations. What advice would you offer or what critique do you have of either the Biden administration or the way that they're prosecuting the campaign thus far?
Well, I think the campaign is sort of engaging in a really young stage right now. It's not fully developed, but I think it's going fine at the moment.
Okay.
I think that when there is a foil to run against, you are going to see juices and energy around Democrats. They're going to get excited. They're going to get psyched because it's going to be a choice between two people. My biggest advice, and this has always been my advice, is that we still, whether we like it or not, we are playing by, at least the legacy media, still plays by Trump's rules.
What does that mean?
That means that he is able to be America's assignment editor, and he is able to drive a lot of the coverage.
Yeah.
He can spend all of his money on his legal bills. Sure, go ahead and spend it. He's not effective as a fundraiser. He's not effective as an organizer. He's effective at owning free media.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's hard to avoid when,
Yeah,
you know,
he's
I
the
mean, these
president,
indictments
man.
are historic. and you
he's
can't help but
the
cover it.
former president.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, it
Yeah.
is. I get it.
Yeah.
He floods the zone and is able to own the airwaves, and they have to compete with that. And part of that is embracing the way Trump kind of embraces the media, treats them as an opportunity, not as a hazard or a threat. And I think if you talk to reporters who cover the White House daily, there are severe levels of distrust. And you know what? There's no reason to be. Generally speaking, the president likes the press, but he should engage them more. And they should build constructive relationships that earn them goodwill and not lose them the benefit of the doubt. And I think if you talk to a lot of reporters, sadly, I think that's been going on. And I would say that the president should engage more with the media, not less.
Well, we agree.
yeah.
We would be happy to host him here.
Yeah.
We've had a
I've
number
been
of
trying.
presidential candidates, so
You should
we
invite.
treat him fairly.
You should call the White House press office and invite him on.
It's not like it hasn't happened many
You can
times.
put in a word for us.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you.
Of
It's nice
course.
to see
Thanks,
you.
Michael.
Yeah, of course.
I hope you'll come back and join us again.
Anytime.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.